everybody. Kevin here, top 100 financial advisor, two-time author, one-time bestseller, and we're here to talk about the stock market. Initially, I had a completely different video planned for today, but this news just came out maybe about an hour and some change ago, and it's pretty big. The Dow Jones is being shaken up, which means that stuff is going to change here in the next few days. So what I want to do is explain what the Dow Jones is and what it means, and then who's coming in and who's coming out and why that is significant. So give me one quick second. I want to share my screen, but I want to share the whole screen. That way you guys can see the whiteboard too, which you should be able to see now. All right, so the Dow Jones was the original index. It was like the first one. And what we mean by that is it tracks the performance of large companies. Now, Dow Jones is the most famous because it was the first, and it represents the 30 largest companies. These are what we call blue chip. So these are the biggest, baddest companies that that we all know. However, the downside to the Dow is it doesn't really tell us about the overall stock market. It tells us how these 30 very large, very good companies are. And the way it is weighted is based on price, and they have some really strange numbers. You divide it by whatever number they have, and that's how you get who's in and who's out. Because the stock market has changed so much this year, they are kicking out some companies and adding some more into it. I think it was three in, three out. And I want to draw this diagram to kind of give you an idea of what this kind of looks like. So you've got the Dow Jones here. I guess we'll stick with red. So this is the Dow 30. It's the Dow Jones. It tracks 30 of the biggest companies in the US. Is United States only. You're not going to get any extra companies here. Again, not the best measure, but Apple, Microsoft, the Walmart, these are the companies you absolutely know they are in this index. Then a step down, I wouldn't say a step down, but a bigger, more prominent measure of how the whole stock market is doing, that is the S&P 500. This is the 500 largest companies. It gives us a better feel for what's going on in the overall stock market, and kind of tells us, like, with 500 companies, this is diversified, if you will. You kind of know what's going on. You know what's in, you know what's out. If you drop out of the S&P 500, that is a big deal. You drop out of the Dow, it's a deal, but it's not going to be like, oh my God, your company is failing. You follow the S&P 500, it is a big, big concern. Then from there, you've got the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is about 3,300 companies. And I know my handwriting is terrible. Forgive me, I'm writing on the screen, okay? So you have the NASDAQ. These are mostly technology companies, not all. It's also some international companies in here as well. So you went from the Dow 30, which is just the biggest US companies, to the S&P 500, the 500 largest US companies. Then you've got like really big like tech stocks. Some companies can be in all of these categories. Apple is one of the largest companies, so it's going to be in the Dow, and it's going to be in S&P 500. And as a tech company, it's also going to be in the NASDAQ. So some of these companies, Microsoft is probably in all three of these as well. You can find some that's checks every single box. And then you got the last one. I would call this the last one. You got the Russell 3000. This is the 3,000 largest companies just across the board in the US. And these are all publicly traded companies. Now, these numbers aren't always exact. S&P 500 sometimes like 502 companies. The Russell 3000 could be 3,000 and whatever. But the Russell 3000 is considered to be the most diverse. It's considered to be like the real stock market is the Russell 3000. However, because the S&P 500 makes up so much of it in terms of value, in terms of money, that we just tend to use the S&P 500 as this is the stock market. When we say that we are investing in an S&P 500 index fund, this is why. Even though when you look at the performance between the two, they are almost exactly the same. If you're someone that was thinking of an ETF like VTI, is going to be the Russell 3000 for the most part. So when we say total stock market, this is what we mean. That is technically what you mean. But again, the S&P 500 and the Russell 3000, they're almost the exact same thing anyway, because again, the S&P 500 just takes up so much space because these are huge, huge companies. The other 2,500 you probably don't know about, you probably never heard of it. And I would draw it like this. Y'all know I'm not an artist. I would say this: Russell 3000, and it's not the most mathematic thing. Of the 3,000 companies, S&P 500 makes up most of that. And then you got whoever else in that little section. So that's just an idea. So don't get wrapped up, oh, should I get the S&P 500? Oh, should I get the Russell 3000? Don't worry about it. Stick with whatever. But again, because these will overlap, like an Apple's going to hit every category. So you invest in the S&P 500, if you invest in the Russell, you got the S&P anyway. You don't need both. And again, the vast majority of the Russell is determined by the S&P 500. Now, same thing I can say with the Dow, because the Dow is so big. This is why you hear like when Google goes down and Apple goes down and a Microsoft, when those three stocks go down, then they say like the entire stock market is down because those are so heavy. That's why, because those stocks, even though they may be just in the Dow or just in the S&P 500, because they're so heavy, it just tips the entire stock market in the right way sometimes or the wrong way in other times. All right, now we've got that explainer out the way. Ask questions. Oh, and share the video. Do that right now. All right. So now we've gotten that out the way. Let's talk about what's happening in the Dow and why it is happening and what to do with that information. So let me go back to our screen here and here. All right. So Salesforce is going to replace Exxon Mobil. This is significant for a few reasons. Exxon has been there for quite some time, but again, I've been telling y'all, I am not a big fan of the oil industry as an investment right now. It's just not a place to really park your money and expect anything good to come out of it. Especially now we have two hurricanes, a hurricane and a half or whatever is hitting Louisiana right now, which means that production is going to be cut off. Usually in these situations, when hurricanes hit, these stocks tend to fall. So it's just not a great situation for them overall. We know that Exxon and Phillips 66 and others just haven't been great over the last like 2 years. So again, it's not a place I would park my money. So Salesforce is replacing them. As you see here, you've got Salesforce, Amgen, and Honeywell International are replacing, let's see, ExxonMobil, Pfizer, which is shocking to me, and Raytheon Technologies. Raytheon makes weapons kind of like Lockheed Martin, if I'm not mistaken. Pfizer is a little bit surprising. So Pfizer, and I've said this before when it comes to like the vaccine companies, they're solid, but they're not going to like, really make you or break you. It's just a good company that just pays decent dividends and stays around. And just because you're getting kicked out of the Dow doesn't necessarily mean that the company is terrible. It just may not be as growing as fast as others. And the way that they calculate this is like share price times a bunch of other different things. So the higher the price of the stock, the better it looks in the Dow. That's not always the case for the S&P 500 and the Russell 3000. For example, Apple was like the first or second highest rated company in the Dow, but because they're doing the stock split, they dropped to like 17. No, that doesn't mean that Apple's going to fall out of the Dow anytime soon, but it does say how the stock price shifts more, like tells you more about the Dow than it does other companies. So again, you have here is a little more detailed on this one. Again, I think Honeywell makes the security stuff, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Salesforce, which has done really well, is replacing Exxon, and then Amgen is replacing Pfizer, and then Honeywell is replacing Raytheon Technology. You can read all about it. But essentially, these are anything in the Dow is usually, not all the time, usually very solid company. I mean, if you're that big, you got a lot of people investing behind. It doesn't mean it's the hottest stock in the world. Because let's see here, I don't think that, yeah, like a Netflix is not in here. Procter and Gamble, been telling y'all about that. You got Verizon, AT&T was kicked out. Disney, like I'm like meh on Disney, but again, so these are just the biggest ones. It does not mean that I need to put my money here. I'm automatically going to make my money. Not necessarily the case. You got Coca-Cola that ain't really made you that much money either, but they are here. So don't just blindly jump into it for the sake of just because they're in the Dow. So do be very careful about that. But as you can see, here's the full list as of today. This will change on the 31st of this month. And speaking of change, the Investors Toolkit, that price does change. We moved it back. It was going to be tomorrow on the 25th. We're actually moving that back to the 1st of September. So you do get an extra few days if you were considering investing in them. All right, quick commercial. All right, so this is the current Dow 30. Again, this will change. My bet, I mean, I don't make the formulas, but I'm looking at Chevron. You might be next, just because ExxonMobil got kicked out based on where they were. So again, here's the Dow 30. Very interesting companies that you probably know, at least pay attention to. Dow, this company is the chemical company, if I'm not mistaken. So Dow is not the same thing here. I know that's a little weird and confusing, but Dow Chemical is one of the companies in here as well. Some of my favorites that we've talked about, Walmart, I think Visa is interesting. United Health Group was on my watch list very early in the year and has done well. Been telling you about Procter & Gamble. I still think Pfizer is okay. My son has Nike. Nike could be doing better, but he's in it for the long term. I like Microsoft. I think Merck could be good. I haven't really looked into that one. We talked about JP Morgan, not a fan of the banks right now. Coca-Cola, meh. Johnson & Johnson is, again, a solid Pfizer category type of stock, but I do think it's going to be very good over the next 6 to 9 months, especially with kids being born, my daughter included. Intel, I need to come back and reevaluate Intel. Just put a pin there. Home Depot we talked about for hurricane season. Cisco took a big hit recently, but I'm holding on at least for now. You guys know my thoughts on Boeing. Talked about that for a while. You know where I am on Apple. Very, very excited about them and where they may go. And then American Express. I just need to look into them. they haven't come across my radar. Something for me to do. All right, so that is those. Now I want to talk about a few that have fallen off and what that means, and what signals it could or could not throw. So again, I don't think any of these companies are going out of business. That is a big thing, because some that do fall out, I wouldn't say go out of business, but they do suffer. So we have some famous examples. I'm not going to talk about Bethlehem Steel because I don't know who they are. This is the 1970s. I wasn't around. But General Electric was one. They were a stalwart, if you will. They got removed twice. Yeah, you can get removed in and out all the time. Honeywell was kicked out like 2 years ago, and now they're back. So you can get in and out just based on how the market moves. So General Electric, not my favorite stock. They've fallen off and were removed again in 2018, as you can see here. They were dropped in the index in 1898 too. Oh, that's wild. Then got dropped again in 1901 and returned in 1907, and had been a mainstay for close to 100 years. That's very interesting. GE has been around for a long time. But again, they were in and out, in and out, in and out. AT&T, they were in, or they were moved in 1928, 2004, and again in 2015. And it doesn't, because they were moved in 2015 is not a reason for why the stock is not great right now. We talked about why they're not great right now, just because of the expenses in the merger that they took on, I think, with Time Warner, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Dish. I think it's Time Warner. I'm pretty sure it's Time Warner. We did a video on that one. Citigroup, I've been kind of meh on them. Sears, ugh. So Sears is one that fell off and went out of business, or is at least heading towards that. These others, like Citigroup, is okay. General Electric is not okay. AT&T, they're okay, but nobody thinks AT&T is going to go bankrupt. So don't overreact to this news, but I'm here to tell you that the market probably will. The market will probably overreact and say, oh my God, Salesforce is the greatest thing ever, and then Raytheon is terrible. We'll see what the market says about this, but it is important to know. I do not think that it is going to be the same effect as a Tesla being added to the S&P 500. The reason why that is there are dozens of ETFs that track the S&P 500. Not so much for the Dow, because nobody, I won't say nobody, there aren't many people that are like, let me buy this tiny ETF of 30 companies that I could have done on my own. Because you really could have, with any app, you could have went through, bought one share of all 30, and you essentially have the whole ETF. Whereas 500 companies is a lot more difficult to do, which is why you see so many of those ETFs versus so many Dow 30 ETFs. So I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying, you're probably not going to get a huge price bump that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And lastly, I want to show you this. Give me one quick second. Let's see if it's going to let me click it. All right, so this is Salesforce over the last year. This is good. This is good if you're an investor in Salesforce. Again, it hasn't really come across my radar, but I will consider it. I'm already heavy in tech anyway, heavy in healthcare and consumer goods, consumer staples, some people call it. So I can only track but so many. But now that's being added to 30, it's on my radar now. I just need to go and look into it and see where I feel, where I think it's going to be over the next few months or so. But you got my attention. But I do want to show you this. So you can compare it to the Dow, which is cool if you want to do that. But also what I want to compare it to is Pfizer to prove a point here. And the point that I'm proving to you is that over the past year, Pfizer made 13%. Now remember, you can't always compare everything to tech, because it is what it is, and it's going to be the strongest company, or usually in the strongest group out there. So it's not fair to say, oh, you didn't beat Amazon, or like, not many companies are. But a double-digit return in a year is pretty good, especially when you compare it to the overall stock market, which I'm going to pick the S&P 500. You can see here, it is probably going to be that. I can almost guarantee that. And oh, wow, I was wrong. Well, well, there you go. So again, I mean, it didn't really change the point. It looks like Pfizer really took a dip in this area, but again, now it didn't outperform the S&P 500. So yeah, it's still solid though. Like you're still getting 13%, but you can still go with index fund here. That's interesting because Pfizer was up until like May a lot better than S&P 500. So very interesting there. But you can kind of see that it's still okay. It is not falling off the map. And that is the key point here. So for example, I'll take the 13%. It's not the 20 that the S&P 500 would have gotten me. It is not the 36% that Salesforce would have gotten me. But here's what I'm trying to avoid. This is Exxon Mobil. And I'm going to make this purple or pink. Look at that. So Exxon Mobil is down 37%. It's really the exact opposite of Salesforce. So just because Pfizer isn't at 20% like the S&P 500 or 36% like Salesforce, it's still an okay place. Not the best thing in the world, not the worst thing in the world, but it ain't Exxon Mobil, and I don't know where Raytheon is. We can see, I think they're RTX. And we'll see. Yeah, Raytheon is down 20. So it doesn't always mean that, oh, you're getting kicked out of Dow, the stock is going to fall off the face of the earth. I don't see that for Pfizer. Obviously, it could happen. I just don't think it's as likely, because it's still in healthcare. It's still a solid company, and they're not in an area that is losing like an Exxon. I don't know why Raytheon is falling. I'm just not one that's on my radar, but now you know. So just wanted to explain what's going on, what is likely to happen over the next, I would say, week or so. It's going to be some buzz around these stocks. Personally, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my homework and decide whether or not Salesforce is something I should look into. That is the only one I'm really interested in, only because myself, I'm a little tech-focused, tech bias. So I'm going to search there first. I'm going to look at some options for Exxon and just see. I don't know. We will see, right? But that's where I'm looking at. But again, this is what's happening. You know what you know, and you know kind of how the Dow relates to the S&P, relates to the NASDAQ, and relates to the overall stock market, which is technically the Russell 3000. But we just use the S&P 500 because, We care about the stocks that really matter, which is essentially the 500. All right. So thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for sharing this video. If you haven't, it's not too late. Go ahead and share. And then make sure you check out the Investors Toolkit. I will leave the link above. Again, the price will change on the 1st of September. So if you were considering how do you figure out what's going on here in this chart, what stocks should you buy, how should you open your account, all those questions are answered inside of the course. It is the easiest step-by-step investing course, period, flat out. Now, I'm gonna just leave it at that. You're getting the help of a top 100 financial advisor and someone who's a former teacher. So I make sure that everything is lined out, that you're not lost, that you're not going to be like, talked over, and that if you have questions, you get my access. I usually respond within 24 to 48 hours. All right. That is it for me. I will see y'all tomorrow, and y'all be safe if y'all in the Louisiana area, things of that nature. And I'll see you tomorrow.